found out about the wedding fund the same way I always seem to find out everything in my family. By accident. My mom left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she went outside to take a call. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen. Lines. Columns. Dollar signs. I leaned closer. Not snooping. Just curious. And then I saw it. Wedding savings, Lily. $25,000. Set aside. Organized. Carefully tracked across 4 years. My name wasn't anywhere on that sheet. Not once. Not a line. Not a footnote. Not even a future plans. Just blank space where I should have been. My heart did that weird sinking and floating thing at the same time. The one that says you're surprised and you already knew in the same breath. Mom came back in, laughing into the phone, stirring sauce like this wasn't the moment my brain rewrote our entire family history. I closed the laptop slowly. Pretended nothing happened. Dinner smelled like garlic and butter and a lie I couldn't swallow anymore. That night I lay in my childhood bed staring at the ceiling. Same glow-in-the-dark stars. Same creaking fan. Same feeling I've always had here. Present. But somehow extra. Like furniture you keep for later. When my sister announced her engagement 2 months later, it all made sense. The hugs. The screams. The champagne. The squeals about venues and colors and flowers. And then my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. We're finally going to use Lily's wedding fund. So excited. No mention of me. No memory of my milestones. No, we wish we could have done something like this for you. Just pure joy. For them. For her. For the story they wanted to tell. The day of the proposal party, the house looked like a Pinterest board had exploded. White lights. Balloons. Charcuterie boards that cost more than my monthly groceries. People kept saying, "They've planned this for years," and each time the words scraped along my ribs. Later that night, after everyone left, I helped with the dishes. My hands in the warm water. My voice calm. "Hey," I said finally. "Out of curiosity, did you ever plan something like that for me?" My mom blinked. "Like what?" "A fund," I said. "A wedding fund. Or anything." She laughed. Light. Dismissive. "You were always the independent one. You never needed that." The sentence landed like a slap wrapped in a compliment. Independent. Translation: you didn't get because we decided you wouldn't ask. "But you had it," I said quietly. "You had $25,000. You chose where it went." Mom shrugged. Different kids. Different needs. And somewhere inside me something cracked. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just finally. I didn't argue. Old habits die slowly. I drove home with my jaw tight and my chest on fire. Weeks passed. Dress fittings. Cake tastings. Venue tours. Group chats full of exclamation points. I smiled when I was supposed to. Liked photos when I was tagged. And then on the day of the wedding it happened. My sister walked down the aisle in a designer gown. Veil like clouds. Flowers everywhere. Guests whispered about how beautiful everything looked. I sat in the second row, heart beating too loud in my ears. After the ceremony, my phone buzzed. A text from my parents. Not a hug. Not a conversation. Not a thank you for being here. Just 2 words. "Congrats, sweetie." That was it. $25,000 worth of effort for one daughter. A 2-word text for the other. And in that moment, standing there in the middle of the prettiest day money could buy, something inside me finally said, "Enough!" I didn't answer the text. I just stared at it. 2 words glowing on my screen while the DJ announced the first dance like this was the happiest night in the world. People laughed. Glasses clinked. My parents posed for photos like magazine parents. Proud, perfect, untouchable. Inside, I felt invisible. I slipped outside for air. The night was warm and thick with the smell of flowers and expensive perfume. Lights strung across the courtyard sparkled like they were mocking me. I sat on a stone bench and tried to breathe normally. A minute later, footsteps. My sister. Wedding dress gathered carefully in her hands. "Hey," she said softly. "You okay?" I nodded automatically. Reflex. The lie I've worn my whole life. "Yeah." Beautiful wedding. She studied my face. She knows me better than anyone. "You're lying," she said gently. I swallowed. My throat felt like sandpaper. "It's not you," I said. "It's everything." I told her about the spreadsheet, the fund, the years of planning, text message, the way it all added up to one truth that hurt more than any single moment. She listened without interrupting. Tears filled her eyes slowly. "They never told me," she whispered. "I didn't know." I believed her. My parents have always been good at playing architect while pretending they're just improvising. She reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't want any of this if it means you're hurt." I shook my head. "It's not your fault. I'm glad you're happy. I just wish they loved us the same way." The words hung between us like fragile glass. She squeezed my fingers. "Talk to them," she said. "Please." That night, after the speeches and the dancing and the fake smiles, I went home and sat on the edge of my bed. My dress still on. My makeup smudged. I opened our family group chat and scrolled years back. Birthdays. Graduations. Holidays. My wins were met with nice or thumbs up emojis. My sister's wins were parades. Flowers. Champagne. Countdowns. I wasn't jealous of what she had. I was grieving what I never got to feel. Being chosen. Being planned for. Being someone's priority. 2 in the morning, while the world slept, I started drafting a message. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just honest. Then I deleted it. Then I wrote it again. Deleted again. Old fear kept whispering. Don't rock the boat. Be grateful. Don't be difficult. But there was another voice now. Quieter. Stronger. Asking, "And what about you?" I finally set the phone down and closed my eyes. I knew what needed to happen. Not a fight. Not a scene. A conversation where I stopped shrinking just to keep the peace. A conversation where I asked the question I've avoided all my life. Why wasn't I worth the same effort? I invited them over a week later. No dramatic build-up. No cryptic messages. Just, "Can we have dinner here? I want talk." My mom brought dessert like it was any other visit. My dad carried groceries like a peace offering. We cooked together. Chopped. Stirred. Avoided eye contact. Kitchen smelled like garlic and tension. When we finally sat down, my hands shook a little. Not from fear. From the weight of finally saying something I had swallowed for years. "I need to ask you something," I began. My dad set his fork down slowly. My mom's smile froze. "Of course," she said too brightly. I breathed. In. Out. "When you saved for Lily's wedding, did you ever think about saving for me?" Silence. Not quiet. Heavy. My mom blinked, startled by how direct the question was. My dad cleared his throat. "We helped you in other ways," he said quickly. "College applications. Gas money. Advice." I nodded. "I know. But that's not what I asked." My mom sighed like I was being unreasonable. "You were always the practical one," she said. "You didn't talk about weddings or parties. You talked about work and moving out and being independent. We didn't think you wanted that. There it was again. Independent. A word they used like a compliment, but one that always felt like a door closing quietly in my face. Did it ever occur to you to ask? I said softly. My mom looked down at her plate. My dad leaned back, arms crossed. Defensive posture. Familiar. Money doesn't mean love, he said. We love you both the same. My chest tightened. I'm not saying you don't love me, I replied. I'm saying you planned for her future. You invested time, effort, sacrifices. And with me, you assumed I would just figure it all out alone. They didn't answer. I could see the discomfort crawling across their faces. For a moment, I almost backed down. The old script tugged hard. Say you're sorry. Make it easier. Laugh it off. But I didn't. Not this time. The day of the wedding, I continued, you sent me a text. Congrats. That was all. My mother flinched like I'd slapped her. My dad frowned. We were busy, he said. It was a big day. I nodded. Exactly. A big day. A $25,000 day. And your other daughter, the one who didn't have a fund, who didn't get planned for, got a 2-word text. Truth settled over the table like dust. Unavoidable. Uncomfortable. But real. My mom's voice softened, finally losing its defensive edge. We didn't realize it felt like that. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to cry. Instead, I spoke slowly. It didn't just feel like that. It was like that. I have spent my whole life being the one who doesn't need anything. The one who doesn't cause trouble. The one who makes room. And somewhere along the way, I think you started believing I don't need care at all. My dad stared at me for a long time. Then he said quietly, What are you asking for? Not sarcastic. Genuine. I swallowed. This was the terrifying piece. Not punishment. Not payback. Just clarity. I want acknowledgement, I said. That it wasn't fair. That I was left out. And I wanted to change going forward. I don't want to be the afterthought in my own family anymore. The room went still. My mom's eyes brimmed with tears. She didn't blink away. My dad looked down at his hands like they belonged to someone else. For the first time, I saw it. Not malice. Not cruelty. Just old patterns they'd never questioned because I never made them. 'Cause I learned so early that quiet girls keep the peace. And peace in this house always seemed to mean silence. But not anymore. My mom reached across the table like she wanted to take my hand, then stopped halfway, unsure. The hesitation said more than words. We did our best, she whispered. I nodded. I know you did. But your best still hurt me. She inhaled sharply. My dad rubbed his forehead. You have to understand, he said, falling back into old habits. Lily has always been delicate. She needed more help. I felt the old narrative wrap around the room like smoke. Delicate, sensitive, fragile, and by contrast me, strong, capable, fine. Needing help doesn't make someone more deserving, I said quietly. It just means they needed different help. But you equated my competence with not needing care at all. My mom finally spoke up. We worried if we did too much for you, we'd hold you back. I almost laughed. Not cruelly. Just at the irony. And yet, I said, I spent years trying to prove I could survive without you. That isn't independence. That's survival mode. The room went quiet again. This time, it didn't feel like a wall. More like a door creaking open. My dad exhaled slowly. So what do we do now? It was the first time he'd ever asked me something like that. Not what he thought I should do. Not what his plan was. What I needed. I took a second before answering. Start by acknowledging it, I said. Not brushing it away. Not saying I'm overreacting. Just say it wasn't fair. My mom stared at the tablecloth. Then at me. Her voice broke when she spoke. It wasn't fair. The words landed heavy and warm at the same time. Years of swallowed feelings loosened in my chest. My dad nodded reluctantly. We didn't think about it the way you're saying. But you're right. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. Not all of it was fixed. Not magically healed. But seen. For once, I wasn't the unreasonable one. Or the dramatic one. Or the difficult one. I was the daughter who finally stopped pretending everything was fine. We spent the rest of dinner talking. Clumsily. Awkwardly. With long pauses and little jokes that didn't quite land. But it was real. Before they left, my mom hugged me longer than usual. Thank you for telling us, she whispered. I'm sorry it took this long. When the door closed behind them, I leaned against it and breathed. Not triumphant. Not victorious. Just lighter. Like I had finally placed a heavy box down after carrying it too far. That night, lying in bed, I realized something important. This wasn't about money. Not really. It was about value. About who gets prepared for. Who gets protected. Who gets thought of in advance instead of as an afterthought. For so long, I thought changing them was the goal. But maybe the real change was this. Me no longer shrinking. Me choosing to speak. Me allowing myself to want more than good enough. And as I drifted towards sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet kind of peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because finally I wasn't silent anymore. The next few days felt strange. Not bad. Just unfamiliar. My phone buzzed more than usual. A check-in from my mom. A photo my dad sent of the backyard he was fixing. Small things. Ordinary on the surface. But weighted differently now. Intentional. Like they were trying, even if they weren't sure how. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone to say, you're being dramatic, or let's just move on, the way they always did when conversations got uncomfortable. But it didn't happen. Instead, my mom asked if she could come over again. Just us, she texted. No agenda. She showed up with tea and a nervous smile. We sat at my tiny kitchen table, steam curling up between us like a truth serum. She fiddled with the handle of her mug for a long moment before speaking. When I was your age, she said, eyes focused somewhere far beyond the wall, my parents didn't help me with anything. I worked. I paid. I figured it out. And I promised myself my kids would never feel unprepared the way I did. She paused. Then Lily came along and she cried at everything. First days at school. Sleepovers. Job interviews. I panicked. I thought, if I don't plan ahead for her, she'll fall apart. I listened. Not to excuse. Just to understand. And me? I asked softly. She looked at me. Really looked. You didn't cry, she said. You just copied your backpack, straightened your shoulders, and did it. I took that as proof you didn't need the same kind of help. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But I still needed help, I said. Just a different kind. She nodded, tears pooling. I know that now. I confused quiet with strong. And strong with unbreakable. That wasn't fair to you. Something loosened again inside my chest. Not erased. Not rewritten. But softened. We talked about things we had never said out loud. First job I worked 3 shifts at because I was too scared to ask for support. The nights I cried myself to sleep after paying bills alone. The way I pretended I loved being independent because the alternative was facing the truth. Nobody had prepared for me. My mom squeezed my hand. I don't know how to go back, she whispered. But I want to do better going forward. Those words mattered. Not because they solved anything, but because they placed responsibility in the right direction. Not on my shoulders, not on my silence, on choices they had made, choices they could change. Later that week, my dad asked to meet for coffee. That alone was unusual. He's not a talk over lattes kind of man. He sat across from me, calloused hands around a paper cup, as if he were holding something fragile. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said at dinner. My stomach tightened, bracing for correction or argument. Instead, he continued, slower than usual, I grew up believing kids earn their place by working hard. Nobody saved for me. Nobody talked about futures. So when I saw you working, I thought that meant you were fine. But I can see now how lopsided that was. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm sorry. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. Heavy. Real. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The apology wasn't decoration. It was acknowledgement. The thing I'd asked for. We sat there in a quiet that felt new. Not defeated. Not tense. Just honest. I don't want money from you, I said gently. I never did. I just wanted to matter in advance. Not as an afterthought. He nodded. We hear you. And we'll do better. It wasn't dramatic. No swelling music. No grand gesture. But it was the beginning of a relationship built on something other than pretending. That night, as I walked home, streetlights flickering above me, I realized the most unexpected part of all this. Speaking up hadn't ruined anything. It hadn't shattered the family. If anything, it had cracked open the shell we'd all been living in, where politeness replaced truth and silence masqueraded as peace. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the extra piece in my own story. I felt like someone whose voice finally counted. A few weeks later, life settled into something that looked normal on the outside but felt different underneath. I went to work, paid bills, cooked dinner, answered emails, ordinary things. But the quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. Felt chosen. Mine. Not the silence I used to choke on. My parents started asking questions they had never asked before. Real ones. How are you doing, really? What do you need this month? Do you want us there? Sometimes I didn't know how to answer. For so long, I had trained myself to say, I'm fine, automatically. Saying anything else felt like walking barefoot across a floor I wasn't sure was safe. One evening, my mom texted me a photo of a flyer. Financial planning workshop. Do you want to go together? She wrote. I stared at the message for a long second. Not because I needed someone to hold my hand, but because nobody had ever offered to stand next to me before. Yeah, I typed back. I'd like that. The workshop was nothing glamorous. Conference room with bad coffee, squeaky chairs, and a projector that buzzed like it had opinions. But as the presenter talked about saving, planning, preparing ahead, I felt something ache inside. This was what I had been missing all along. Not the money itself, but the sense of being considered. Of having someone in your corner saying, we're thinking about your future too. On the drive home, my mom gripped the steering wheel and said, we should have done this years ago. I shrugged, soft instead of bitter. We're doing it now. And that mattered more than the past repeating itself like a bruise. My dad surprised me, too. One afternoon, he showed up with a toolbox. Your porch light flickers, he said. Figured I'd fix it. For a second, I almost said, it's fine. 'Cause that had always been my default answer. But instead, I opened the door wider. Let him in. Let him help. We worked side by side. He handed me screws and explained things he'd never slowed down enough to explain before. Not because I couldn't do it, but because for the first time he wasn't assuming I had to do everything alone. When he finished, he wiped his hands and looked at me carefully. "You know," he said, "I used to think being strong meant not needing anybody. But maybe strength is letting people show up before things fall apart." I smiled. Small. Honest. "Yeah. Maybe." That night, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and thought about the girl I used to be. The one who kept her head down at family gatherings. The one who swallowed questions. Who cried in bathrooms. Who normalized being left out because it was easier than admitting it hurt. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, "You were never asking for too much. You were asking for enough." The biggest change wasn't my parents. It was me. I no longer measured my worth by how little space I could take up. I wasn't waiting for crumbs of effort like they were miracles. I was learning to ask. To name things. To say, "This isn't fair," without apologizing for it. And slowly, almost quietly, the dynamic shifted. We laughed more. Fought less. Not because conflict disappeared, but because it finally had air to breathe instead of being shoved under rugs and disguised as politeness. For the first time, I felt like I was not only attending my own life. I was present in it. Seen. Counted. The first real test came sooner than I expected. A cousin invited the whole family to a big dinner. Kind of event where everyone dresses nicely, old stories come out, and subtle comparisons float around like perfume. In the past, I would have shown up early, helped cook, smiled through comments that stung, and gone home exhausted. This time, I went later. On purpose. I walked in and immediately felt the atmosphere. My aunt talking loudly about venue deposits. My uncle bragging about investments. Someone joked about how Lily got the dream wedding, and I watched heads nod like it was a movie everyone had already seen. I sat. Listened. Stayed calm. When the conversation inevitably turned toward me, my dad surprised me. "She's doing great," he said. "Working hard. Planning ahead. We're really proud of her." It was simple. But the difference echoed. Proud. Not as an afterthought. Not as a brief acknowledgement. As something said out loud. For years, those words had only been reserved for big flashy milestones, usually not mine. Now they were spoken gently. Directly. My aunt raised an eyebrow. Planning for what? My mom didn't hesitate. Her future? That one sentence settled into my chest like warmth. Not envy. Not competition. Just inclusion. A place at the table I had always technically had, but rarely felt. Later that night, while the dishes clanged and laughter floated from the kitchen, I found myself standing by the window with my cousin. She's close to my age. She lowered her voice. "Your parents seem different lately." I felt a small smile tug at my lips. "We talked," I said simply. She nodded. "Good. You deserved that." It hit me how strange it used to feel to imagine saying something like that out loud. Like claiming space was somehow rude. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. "Thank you for coming tonight." It meant a lot. I reread it twice. Not because it was extraordinary, but because for the first time I believed it. Weeks turned into months. The wedding faded into memory. The emotional bruises faded too, not erased, but not fresh either. One afternoon, my sister called. Her voice cracked right away. "Marriage is harder than Instagram makes it look," she said. We talked for an hour. Laughing. Crying a little. Sharing honestly. And somewhere between sentences, I realized something. Our connection had grown deeper, not in spite of the truth I'd spoken, but because of it. Me telling the truth didn't create distance. Silence had done that. Honesty built a bridge neither of us knew how to build before. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights blink like steady breaths. I thought about the version of me who stood at that wedding feeling like an extra in someone else's life. And the version sitting here now. Not richer. Not dramatically different from the outside. But grounded. Clear. I finally understood something I wish I had learned sooner. Families don't always hurt you because they hate you. Sometimes they hurt you because patterns go unquestioned. Roles get assigned. Silence gets rewarded. And nobody stops long enough to ask, is this actually fair? Until someone finally does. And strangely, that someone had turned out to be me. A turning point came on a random Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No holiday. No crisis. Just my parents coming over for dinner because I invited them, not out of obligation but because I genuinely wanted to share my space with them. Cooked something simple. Pasta. Salad. Bread from the bakery down the street. We sat at the table, the three of us, like any other family. But there was something new in the air. Less performance. More presence. Halfway through the meal, my mom looked around my apartment. Plants I kept alive. The artwork on the wall. The little touches that made it mine. You've built a really nice life, she said quietly. I glanced up, unsure how to respond. Compliments had always come with strings before. Comparison. Advice. Corrections disguised as guidance. But this one just sat there. Clean. Simple. Thank you, I said. My dad nodded. You did that, he added. We should have helped more. We see that now. The words didn't reopen the wound. They wrapped gently around it. Acknowledgement. Not excuses. Not blame. Just truth. Through dinner, we washed dishes together. My mom at the sink. Me drying. My dad wiping the counters with slow, careful movements like being here mattered. And then, like it had been living in her chest for months, my mom finally said it. When we texted you congrats that day, we thought we were giving you space. We didn't realize we were giving you distance. The honesty stunned me. I leaned back against the counter. It felt like I didn't register, I admitted. Like the wedding was everything and I was background noise. She nodded. I hate that you felt that way. My dad sighed. I wish we could go back and redo certain moments. For the first time, I didn't rush to comfort them. I didn't say it's fine out of reflex. I let the truth stay on the table. We can't redo it, I said. But we can do better now. My mom smiled through a tear. We will. Later, after they left, I sat in the quiet and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. The faint noise of cars outside. Normal life. But inside me, something shifted again. For so long, I thought healing would look like a dramatic apology scene. Tears. Peaches. Big promises. Instead, it looked like this. Small conversations. Repeated honesty. Effort showing up in ordinary days. I picked up my phone, scrolled back to that old text, "Congrats, sweetie," and felt something I never expected. Not rage. Not heartbreak. Just distance from the girl who had read it and thought, of course. That's what I deserve. That girl had believed being grateful meant staying silent. She thought asking for more meant being demanding. Difficult. Ungrateful. But this version of me knew better. Boundaries weren't rebellion. They were clarity. And clarity wasn't cruelty. It was love for myself first. The next weekend, my sister invited me over. We sat on her couch, surrounded by leftover wedding decorations still stuffed into boxes. She curled her legs under herself and looked at me with wide, honest eyes. I've been thinking a lot, she said, about how much was done for me. And how little was done for you. It doesn't feel right. I shrugged gently. It's complicated. She shook her head. Complicated doesn't mean okay. Then she did something that made my throat tighten. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope. "This isn't charity," she said quickly. "And it's not payback. It's me saying, I see it now, and I want to support you the way everyone insisted on supporting me." Inside were a few bills. Not a lot. Nothing extravagant. But symbolic. Intentional. I didn't take it. Instead, I hugged her. Long reel. "Thank you for seeing me," I whispered. 'Cause that was all I had ever wanted. Not equal money. Not matching celebrations. Just equal visibility. Cool consideration. Cool weight in the story. That night, as I drove home, the city lights stretched out like constellations. And I felt something I never thought would come from speaking up. Not revenge. Not vindication. But balance. A sense that, finally, the scales were not tipped so far I had to hold my breath just to stay upright. I realized then that families don't magically become fair. People learn. They unlearn. They stumble. They try again. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't stay silent for peace, but speak truth to make peace real. The real shift showed itself months later in a situation that looked small from the outside, but felt enormous from where I stood. My car broke down. Not dramatically. No smoke. No explosion. Just one stubborn sound followed by silence. Old me would have panicked quietly. Taken out another credit card. Figured it out alone. Told no one because needing help always felt like failing. This time I did something different. I called my parents. Not to demand. Not to guilt trip. Just to share what was happening. "The mechanic says it'll be around 1,200, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. The kind that usually meant I should brace myself for a lecture about responsibility, budgeting, or learning the hard way. Instead, my dad said, "Okay, let's talk through options together." No shame. No sighing. No disappointment disguised as wisdom. Together. The word wrapped around me like a blanket. My mom asked questions. What did the mechanic say exactly? Could they see the estimate? Did I feel safe getting home? We made a plan. Part from my savings. Part from theirs. Not because they owed me, but because we were finally allowed to support each other without it turning into a ledger. After the call, I sat in the parking lot and cried. Not from fear. From relief. From the realization that asking for help didn't make me small. It made me human. That weekend, they came over with groceries and insisted on cooking. We ate at my table. Laughed. Watched a movie. Nothing spectacular. But the quiet didn't hurt anymore. Felt steady. Steady is underrated. Later that night, after they left, I took out an old box from the back of my closet. Inside were journals. Letters I never sent. Thoughts I wrote down when I felt invisible but didn't have the courage to speak. I flipped through page after page of 20-year-old me begging the universe for anyone to see how hard I was trying. I grieved for her for a while. For the way she curled herself smaller, hoping shrinking would make her easier to love. Then I closed the box gently. Not because I wanted to forget, but because those pages no longer felt like my present. They felt like history. Lessons carved into paper. Reminders of why I refused to disappear again. Around this time, my sister invited all of us over for dinner. Her husband, my parents, and me. Halfway through, she looked at our parents and said something that stunned me. "When I have kids," she said, "I want to raise them differently. I want to make sure none of them ever feel less planned for than the others." We learned something here. My mom nodded slowly. My dad squeezed her hand. Nobody argued. Nobody pretended. The room felt honest in a way our family rarely had before. And I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Speaking up had ripples. Future kids. Future patterns. A whole line of people who might grow up feeling seen because one person finally said, "This doesn't feel right," Driving home that night, I rolled the windows down and let the wind rush in. I thought about the girl at the wedding, the one staring at a congrats text like it was proof she didn't matter. She had felt disposable, replaceable, extra, and yet somehow she had still chosen to trust her voice, to ask for fairness, to stop performing gratitude for scraps. Maybe that's what growing up really is. Not just getting older, but realizing you're allowed to rewrite the role you were handed. You're allowed to say, this version of me no longer exists. By the time I pulled into my driveway, one truth felt clearer than ever. Love is not proven by how loudly people celebrate you in public. It's proven by who shows up in the quiet, who listens when you speak, who adjusts when they finally understand they hurt you, even if they never meant to. And for the first time, I no longer felt like a guest at my own family table. I felt like I belonged there, not because I earned it, but because I was always supposed to. A few weeks later, something happened that really tested everything I thought I had learned. My parents invited me over for dinner on a random Tuesday night. No holiday. No birthday. Just come by if you're free. Old memories made me suspicious. Random invitations had usually meant one thing. They needed something. As I drove there, my brain spun old narratives. What if they're about to ask for money? What if they're about to minimize everything again? What if they pretend none of it happened? I almost turned the car around. Instead, I took a deep breath and kept going. Boundaries don't mean running. They mean staying while still protecting yourself. When I walked in, the table was already set. Not fancy. Just warm. Candles. My favorite pasta. A chair saved for me like it mattered that I was there. We ate for a while. Chatted. Laughed. Then my dad cleared his throat. That sound used to make my stomach drop. This time I didn't brace. I just waited. We've been thinking a lot, he said. About patterns. About what we did without realizing it. My mom nodded. We always thought survival was love, she added quietly. Work hard. Provide what we could. Keep the house running. We never stopped long enough to ask if our choices made you feel small. The room went quiet. I could hear the clock in the hallway ticking. Click, click, click. My heart echoed the sound. We can't undo the past, my dad continued. But we don't want to keep pretending it didn't matter. It did. You mattered. You still do. For a second, I didn't trust the words. I waited for the explanation, the defense. Never came. My mom reached across the table. Her hands were shaking. You didn't imagine it, she whispered. You weren't dramatic. You weren't ungrateful. You were hurt. And we didn't see it. Something inside me loosened. Not completely. Healing isn't a light switch. It's more like a dimmer. Slowly brighter. Slowly clearer. We talked for hours. Not the old way. Not walking on eggshells. Not avoiding. Real talk. They asked questions. Hard ones. What moments hurt the most? What words stuck with me? What I needed now? I was honest. I didn't sugarcoat. I also didn't try to punish them. I explained that sometimes when they celebrated big things for others but barely acknowledged mine, it taught me that effort was invisible unless it sparkled. I explained that the "you're strong, you'll figure it out" line had felt like abandonment wearing encouragement as a disguise. My dad listened with his head in his hands. My mom wiped her eyes with the corner of a napkin. No defensiveness. No eye rolls. Just presence. At one point my mom said, I wish someone had told us we were allowed to slow down and notice. That sentence stayed with me. Because it wasn't an excuse. It was an awareness. And awareness is where change starts. After dinner, my mom brought out a small box. I expected something symbolic. A letter. Maybe old photos. Instead, inside was a simple ring. My grandmother's. The same ring they had once said was better off staying in the family safe. My breath caught. "We should have given this to you years ago," my mom said softly. "We kept telling ourselves there would be a perfect time. But there never is. There is only now." I didn't take it right away. Not because I didn't want it, but because I wanted to be sure it wasn't a bandage slapped over a wound. "This isn't to erase anything," I said carefully. "Right?" My dad shook his head. "No. It's to acknowledge that we kept things locked away out of fear and control. And we don't want to live like that anymore." I slid the ring on my finger. Didn't magically fix our past. But it did feel like planting something new in soil that had finally been turned over. Later that night, while driving home, I realized something else. Forgiveness for me wasn't about pretending they never hurt me. It wasn't about making their choices seem reasonable. It was about freeing myself from carrying the entire weight of their growth. They had work to do, and they were finally doing it. I didn't have to drag them there. I didn't have to script their apologies. I could just receive. Not like a starving person taking crumbs, but like someone who knows deep down that they deserve wholeness. The next morning, I woke up lighter. Not ecstatic. Not euphoric. Just grounded. I made coffee. Then the curtains. Let the sunlight spill across the floor. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't waking up with a war inside me. Not between loyalty and self-respect. Not between silence and truth. Just quiet. Kind that feels earned. And that's when it really hit me. The most powerful moment of my story wasn't when I confronted them. Wasn't when the truth exploded in a room full of witnesses. It was this. Calm kitchen. Cup of coffee. A life that finally felt like it belonged to me. 'Cause revenge, the real kind, the kind that doesn't poison you, isn't about humiliation or payback. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that were ignored. It's choosing peace over performance. It's standing tall in your own space and saying, "I'm not the afterthought anymore." My family didn't suddenly become perfect. They didn't rewrite history. But they met me where I finally stood. And that changed everything. Healing has this strange habit of circling back and testing whether the lesson actually landed. You think, "Okay, I get it now," and life says, "All right, let's see." That test came for me a few months later during a family gathering. A big one. Extended relatives. Cousins. Aunts. Uncles. People who still thought we were the glossy, picture-perfect family they'd seen at holidays. We were in my parents' backyard. Fairy lights. Food on the grill. Kids running around. Someone put on music from when we were kids and everyone got nostalgic. At some point, one of my aunts leaned across the table, smiled at me, and said, "You were always the easy one. Never any trouble. Your parents had it so good with you." Before, I would have just laughed politely. Shrugged. Said something like, "Yeah, I guess." Kept the illusion going. This time, I felt that old sentence hit differently. Easy one. Trouble. Good. The labels. Categories. The invisible expectations that shaped my entire childhood. I took a breath. My parents were sitting right there. They tensed a little. Waiting. Bracing. I looked at my aunt and said calmly, "I wasn't easy. I was quiet." "That's different." Table went still. Forks paused halfway up. My aunt blinked. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. I didn't attack. I didn't perform. I just told the truth. Being quiet just meant I learned early that my feelings didn't take up much space in this house. So I folded them smaller. That doesn't make a child easy. It just makes them invisible. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I felt grounded. rooted. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mom's chin wobble. My dad looked like someone had opened a window inside him. My aunt reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I never thought of it that way," she said softly. "I'm glad you said something." Conversation flowed back into motion. Kids laughed. Someone burned a burger. The music changed. But something big had shifted. The truth was no longer a grenade. It was simply part of the air. And the world didn't collapse. Nobody exploded. The sky didn't fall. Instead, the room felt clearer, lighter, honest. Later that evening, while everyone moved inside for dessert, my dad found me on the porch. He leaned on the railing beside me. No speeches. No dramatic sighs. Just a simple, "I'm proud of you." I smiled, but I didn't lean on it like oxygen. I didn't crave it. I accepted it. "There's a difference." I said, "Thanks. I'm proud of me too." That felt new. Saying it out loud. Owning it. He nodded, eyes shining a little. "We're still learning," he said. "We probably always will be." And for once, that didn't terrify me. Comforted me. 'Cause learning means movement. Movement means there's no going back to pretending. As the night wound down, I drove home again, headlights carving the road. I thought about the girl who used to hold her breath in family rooms, terrified of saying the wrong thing. I thought about the woman I was becoming. Someone who didn't have to turn her feelings into tiny, acceptable pieces. Someone who could sit at a table and take up actual space without apologizing. There was a time when I believed the only way to survive was to disappear. Now I was learning the opposite. Survival was actually presence. Being seen. Being heard. Being honest even when the room was full. When I got home, I stood in the doorway for a moment and just listened to the quiet. Not the lonely kind. Peaceful kind. My space. My life. Built slowly. Honestly. Without begging anyone to hand it to me. On the kitchen counter sat the ring my mother gave me a few weeks earlier. I picked it up. Turned it between my fingers. It didn't feel like a reward anymore. Felt like a symbol. Not of perfection, but of acknowledgement. Of movement. Of a family not defined by its prettiest pictures, but by its willingness to face the ugly ones too. And here's something I wish someone had told me years ago. Closure doesn't always arrive as an apology delivered perfectly on time with all the right phrases. Sometimes closure shows up as your own voice saying, "I'm allowed to outgrow this." Sometimes it comes as boundaries that feel uncomfortable at first but eventually become doors. Real doors. Ones that open both ways. Doors you can step through without losing yourself. Standing there, I realized I wasn't haunted by the congrats text anymore. I wasn't replaying old birthdays or old wounds on repeat. Those memories still existed, but they no longer dictated my worth. They were chapters, not definitions. And maybe that's the real outcome nobody talks about. Not revenge. Not dramatic endings. But steady, quiet freedom. The kind where you finally understand that love and self-respect aren't enemies. They're teammates. And you get to choose both. Time has this subtle way of answering questions you didn't even realize you were asking. Months passed. Seasons changed. And somewhere along the way, the story stopped being about what my parents did or didn't do, and started being about who I chose to become after everything. It showed up in small ways first. The way I spoke to myself in the mirror. The way I stopped apologizing before sharing an opinion. The way I no longer rushed to fill silence with explanations. Silence wasn't dangerous anymore. It was just space. Space I was finally allowed to take up. One afternoon, I was at my desk working when my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Not a list. Not a request. Not an obligation disguised as love. Just a simple, "thinking of you. How's your day?" I stared at it longer than I expected. Not because I didn't know how to answer, but because the tone was different. No pressure. No strings. Just presence. I typed back, busy but good. Thanks for asking. Then I put my phone down and smiled. Once upon a time, I would have analyzed that text to death. Now I could just let it be what it was. A few weeks later, I visited home for the weekend. Not out of guilt. Out of choice. The house felt familiar but not consuming. I noticed things I hadn't before. My dad moving slower, softer. My mom pausing more often when she talked, like she was learning how to listen all the way through. At dinner, nobody joked about me being the strong one. Nobody compared me to anyone. Nobody minimized. Instead, conversation flowed like water, steady, calm, mutual. At one point, my mom said, "We're glad you keep coming back." And I realized something huge. I wasn't coming back to prove anything anymore. I was coming back because I wanted to, not because I was still trying to earn a seat. The biggest moment came almost a year after everything began. We were sitting in the living room, the three of us, when my dad said, "We wanted to show you something." He handed me a folder. Inside were papers. Financial planning. Notes. Decisions. He had highlighted a line that read, "Equal support plan for both children." He cleared his throat. "We're working with someone to make sure we don't repeat old patterns," he said. "Not just for now. For the future. We don't want you to ever wonder again where you stand." My mom added, "We know this doesn't erase anything. But it matters to us that we do better, not just say better." For a while, nobody talked. Not because there was tension, but because there was gravity. The good kind. Driving home that night, I thought about the girl who once sat alone staring at a congrats text while everyone else celebrated without her. I thought about how deeply she believed the problem was her. Too emotional. Too sensitive. Too much. Or worse, not enough. If I could sit across from her now, I wouldn't tell her to toughen up. I wouldn't tell her to be grateful. I wouldn't tell her to wait quietly for things to get better. I'd say, "You're allowed to speak. You're allowed to need. You're allowed to want more than crumbs." And I'd tell her something else too. Sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is refuse to disappear. Because here's the truth nobody likes to say out loud. Families can love you and still hurt you. Intent isn't always protection. Tradition isn't always wisdom. And loyalty that costs you your voice is not loyalty, it's self-erasure. The turning point in my life didn't come when I made them see me. Came when I finally saw myself. Fully. Not as the background character. Not as the fixer. Not as the reliable understudy waiting on the sidelines. But as the main character of my own story. Once that clicked, everything else had to rearrange. One evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights blink like quiet stars. The air was cool. My ring glinted softly in the light. My phone buzzed with group chat messages from friends who had become like chosen family. People who listened. Who showed up. Who saw me without needing to be convinced. And I realized something profoundly freeing. My life was bigger than the house I grew up in. Bigger than the patterns I inherited. Bigger than every quiet wound I carried. I wasn't running from my family anymore. I simply wasn't living inside their shadows. Every now and then, people ask me if I ever regret speaking up. The discomfort, the confrontations, the tears were worth it. My answer is simple. Silence had been costing me more for years. My health. My confidence. My sense of self. Finding my voice didn't break my family. It revealed where repairs were needed. And those repairs, slow, imperfect, ongoing, became the real story. Not revenge. Not spectacle. Just slow, steady rebuilding. And if you're listening to this, if some part of you hears your own life echo inside mine, I want you to know this. You are not dramatic for wanting to be considered. You are not selfish for needing support. You are not ungrateful for noticing imbalance. Love that requires silence from you is not love that's safe. And you do not have to earn the right to exist in your own family. My parents once saved for years to create a perfect celebration and sent me a text that was supposed to be enough. Today, they are learning that presence matters more than performance. And I am learning that my worth was never measured by how loudly anyone applauded me. It was always there, waiting for me to claim it. They chose appearances for a long time. I chose truth. And truth, quiet, steady, sometimes uncomfortable, is what finally set all of us free.